Those are the two hobbies in this town. Riding a dirt bike and having sex with women. Can or cannot be your cousin.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today we will be discussing, analyzing, and reviewing another book talk, dark romance. It's questionable. Credence by Penelope Douglass. We will be posting a lightly edited version on our Patreon, which is at Literary Liberation. For more content outside of the podcast, please check out our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and Twitter at LitLibPod. I'm your co-host, Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms.
I'm Kristen. You can find me at KRXXTXN on all social media platforms. Let's get into this juicy, delicious, delectable, the opposite of a meal. This made me hurl my guts out. I hate this book.
This was the worst book that I think either of us have read in 2023. There's nothing positive. I'm gonna be honest. Neither of us recommend this book. We both had it favorited, or
Want
not
to read.
favorited, like
On our
want to
TBR.
read on Goodreads, because it had been recommended so many times underneath the guise of being dark romance. I don't think this is a dark romance. This is just a taboo.
It's not
story.
dark in the way that it's like, I mean, the only thing that's dark about it, which happens in the first, 5 pages, so, spoiler if you want to go into this completely blind, but I would say don't go into this book at all. The only thing dark about it is whenever her parents commit suicide within the first 5 pages of the book. And honestly, they knew what they were fucking doing, because I wish I did that before I read this book.
It was a mess. But before we get into our reviews and whatnot, we can talk about the author, I suppose. Even though it's very difficult to find anything about Penelope.
Personally.
All we really know is,
personally, they're not very personable on the internet. The most you can find, they have an Instagram, but they don't do anything really on it. Posts,
I found that they had a Facebook too, and it was promotional stuff. There wasn't anything of substance to it. The Instagram was the most intriguing bit, in my opinion, and it was full of Harry Potter memes and a lot of other
millennial
very
core,
random, very chuggy millennial core content from 2014,
which is the entirety of this book as well. Honestly, no offense to the millennial generation, but it's very much
millennial in the room.
It
is. It's
that's
the
also
embodiment
who's
of
consuming this mostly, I would say, at least on TikTok, that are praising it.
Thank goodness for now, but I do worry that it's going to get worse, because when you look it up on Kindle for ebooks or Amazon, it says it's a coming of age book, and that concerns me greatly. This should not be labeled as a coming of age book.
It's not. It's a coming of age where she turns 18 and then gets down by her 2 cousins and her uncle.
The TLDR of this book is it's a giant millennial core, barely legal fantasy that's just suited for the male gaze, but in a reading context, not necessarily in the traditional feminist lens of movies and cinema. So that's what it is, which is very strange, because I expected more from Penelope. I don't know why.
Well, you haven't read any of Penelope Douglass's other novels. I've only read one other one, which is Punk 57, and the premise of that is also where they're freshly 18. I don't know about freshly 18, but they're seniors in high school, so it's still very weird to read about. I'm in my younger 20s, so it's a little bit, I think, more normal for somebody my age to read that versus Mariah being pushing 30. But definitely with Penelope Douglass being definitely a millennial. I don't know their exact age, and they use they them pronouns, by the way, so just so anybody is wondering. But they are definitely on the older side, so it's definitely weird to me that their novels that are all the popular ones, at least, follow very young female main characters. I think Credence is one of her bigger ones. Birthday Girl is also one of her bigger ones, which is, I think she's 19 in Birthday Girl, and then has relations with an older man. And then Punk 57 where they're both 18. But it's still very weird to me to be writing smut about teenagers.
And I can only speak for myself, because I'm the oldest one in the room right now, but teenagers don't know anything about, so it's very strange to me to read like these smutty things, and they like are like way more knowledgeable. And just from my own personal experience, I didn't fucking know what I was doing. I don't think most people know what they're doing.
I don't think so either.
It's very weird to read it, and it just doesn't feel realistic. It's not immersive.
Mm-hmm.
It's not relatable.
And the taboo-ness of it doesn't even work in ways where, like, I think you'd probably be a better, like, person to talk about this as well, because, like, I don't read, like, consent, non-consent, or whatever is, like, the genre of, like, book talk, dark romances, which just means that, like, the main character can be and it's okay, is what my understanding of it is.
Videos of people who were recommending this, and they're like, oh, the trigger warnings include dubious consent. It does seem that there is a lot of like criticism around what exactly dubious consent is, and it's not explicit consent, but like everything is fine-ish, but there can be some like harsher elements, and people say, oh, it's fine in like a literary sense, but in real life it would be considered non-con. So it's a very weird kind of gray area.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of what happens in this book does tend to fall over non-con. Like, there are some instances with her and, her uncle.
And her cousin, even whenever she meets one of her cousins for the first time.
But it definitely is. I wish it did explicitly say that there was non-con in there, because that did happen.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That objectively happened.
Yes.
So go into that knowing that even though it's not listed, sexual assault is definitely a very important element in this book.
More than once as well. So, like, especially whenever you read, like, the one scene that it happens in, expect it to happen again as well. Which is, like, so incredibly icky to me, which I know, like, I don't mean to, like, diss on anybody. I don't want to kink shame anybody. But also, whenever you're writing about a 17-year-old freshly... Because she's 17 for probably, I'd say at least, like, the first 30 to 40% of this book. She is a minor, 17, and then in the first, like, 150, 200 pages that she's 17, like, nothing explicitly... I mean, there's one, like, questionable scene that happens where she's still 17, but most of the time, there's nothing insane that happens, really, whenever she's 17, and they act, like... The whole thing is that, like, it gives, like, age is a number, but age is not just a number or whatever, like, whatever the phrasing is. I'm not in pedophile circles.
The saying, like, oh, age is a number, but prison's just a place. I don't,
because
make
it's
of that
just
as you
like,
will. Like,
they act like one day they don't have sex with her, and then the next day, once she turns 18, it's gonna be okay to have sex. Even though mentally you don't change within a day you turn 18 either. And that's one thing that I think is so, like, even, like, her uncle is, like, in his 40s. I think that's what is stated. Her uncle is in her 40s, and then her two cousins that she also gets it on with are in their early 20s, and so she's still 17, freshly 18, and they're still, like, had other life experience. It reminded me a lot
of, like, the controversy around, like, Bad Baby, when she made an OnlyFans, right? That she was launching, like, on her birthday.
On her 18th birthday.
And people were like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this.
That's like, insane.
She's still a child.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that, like, no fault to, like, Bad Baby either. Like, honestly, get your bad girl. You know what I mean? Like, you can prey off of these men and take their money. Good for you. But the fact is, the issue is with the men, and there's no, like, accountability for anything like this, where these people could just be like... And I know the same thing even happened with, like, Billie Eilish and stuff like that, whenever she was 17 and things like that, because, like, she came whenever she was younger. Everyone was like, oh, wait till she's 18, wait till she's 18. Men suddenly think on their 18th birthday they can start objectifying women, because then they'll be labeled a pedophile if they're not. But I would argue, if you're sitting there waiting for someone's 18th birthday, that would still put you in those spheres.
Because they're internalizing it.
Yeah. They're just like, oh, I won't say anything now. You're still having that thought in that way that is so inappropriate for a minor, for a child. I understand that it's like, the book can't hurt you. But this is the book. It hurt me. It physically, like, made me... I'm sick now. After I finished reading that, I got sick. I don't think that's a coincidence.
I've read a lot of like fucked up books. Like I've read like 8 Days to Salvation, like horror erotica. Like I've gone through this before in previous episodes. Like, I've read a lot of messed up stuff. Incest is not good. Like it's never good in any of these books.
The thing that gets me the most with this book as well is that, like, it's like, oh, it's okay, they're not blood related. But then why do they actively go out of their way to mention their familial relationships with each other? Like, why are they having sex and she's moaning Uncle Jake? That is the last thing that she needs to be saying while reading this. Like, what?
Is this what yielded your 0.5 star review? I just saw that. You
Yeah.
rated it 0.5 stars.
I rated it 0.5, so I rated it 1 star on Goodreads, but since on Storygraph you can do 0.5, 0.75, I was thinking about 0.25, but then I thought, I did finish it, so it deserves at least a little of something, but I could not, in my heart, give it anything more than half a star because I hated my life so much reading it. It was literally hell on earth. Like, when I die and Satan's like, you're in hell, this is what's gonna happen, it's just gonna be the only book I can read is this. And that's what's gonna happen.
Penelope Douglass and like an age gap.
And I went into this book, I was so curious about this book. Like, I have like a morbid curiosity, which I think most people that probably do consume dark romances do in a way also have that kind of morbid curiosity and thing. And I was like, oh, okay, it's step cousins. It can't be that bad. But boy, was I fucking wrong. How wrong could I be? Whereas, like, they lean too much. They didn't grow up together, so they're not related in any way. It's just, like, in the law because they're her dad's stepbrother. But it doesn't make it okay if you're gonna sit there and refer to your familial members. I don't care if you're not blood related or not, but to have sex with them and to keep referring to them in these ways, it's sick. It's so sick. It's like, I don't know who's reading this and like, I can't even understand like somebody reading this and getting turned on by it. Like, that is disgusting.
That's what a lot of the reviews were saying, like the positive, like, oh, I was horny sobbing over this because it was so emotional. It's like, you need therapy.
I was hot, like, literally, I was viscerally gagging. Like, I would be, like, dry heaving reading it. It was bad. It was horrendous.
So maybe I should revisit my review. I changed it to a 1, but I just feel bad rating anything, associating it with George Orwell or American Psycho, because those were like objectively the worst books I've ever read. So maybe I'll lower it. It's at a 2 star right now, but I think after this video or podcast, it will be a 1 star on
Goodreads. Because you don't rate on Storygraph, because it hurt. Even though you don't even have to put in all that stuff, you just put your star rating in. Because like, I like to do all the extra steps whenever I rate stuff, but then for this, it was like all of the Storygraph sections. Like, whenever you can rate a book, there's, like, so many things. Like, adventurous, dark, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's so many different things that you can rate. Like, that you check off within, like, whatever you're reading. And then there's also, like, the pace of the book. And then also something else whenever you rate on Storygraph. It's really in-depth. And I like doing all that. These are the worst literary characters I've ever read in my entire life.
None of them are likable, and it's really frustrating, even though, like, Tiernan is the victim throughout this entire book.
I can't feel bad for her. I literally cannot. I have no empathy in my heart for her.
Bourgeois Nepo baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to, like, sympathize with her throughout the whole thing. And, like, it's just, like, you cringe when she says things, and she's like, oh, well, I should have done better. It's like, no, you're just having your mental, emotional states being, like, exploited by your guardians, who are also your family.
The next question: diverse cast of characters. No. And then flaws of the characters, a main focus. Yes, that is what my definitive Storygraph review was, and I can't even honestly go into how bad this is, like, objectively, and I feel like we kind of already been into spoilers just because I wouldn't want my worst enemy to read this book. Like, I do not think anybody deserves to suffer this badly. It's worse than, like, imagine the worst thing about this book and then, like, times it by 10. Because I remember going into, like, oh, it cannot be that bad. You know, I was like, oh, it's probably just a little bit, like, ooh, and I'll read it, and then, like, the smut will be okay, but the story will be lacking. Just, like, because I read Punk 57, and that's pretty much how that was. I was like, it was entertaining, I enjoyed it. I was pulling teeth to sit down and reading this. And the only reason why I finished reading it is because of this podcast.
Yeah, I was in the same boat. Like, it's like such a hot mess that you can't look away, though, at times. Even though the pacing of it is really weird and the timeline of it's super funny at times, like, there will be like 50 pages straight, it's all the same day. And then it'll be like, okay, we're gonna speed up a couple months. It's very confusing in that sense, but it's not worth your time. Like, there's other books that you could spend your time on and your money, and I just don't think this is one of them.
This book is almost 500 pages long.
It was
500.
so long, and the epilogue does not. I don't care what anyone says. The epilogue was dog shit. This whole thing was dog shit. I don't have anything nice to say.
The only thing
Should we get into the quotes?
We can. We should go through these quotes. I've never highlighted the only other book that I've highlighted this much is Babel. But the reason why I was highlighting Babel was because it was good. The stuff I began highlighting in this was completely outrageous. So I'll say we're probably going in specifically into the spoiler zone, just because I feel like you can't. Don't read this book. Me and Mariah do not endorse this book. Do not waste your time reading this book. Instead, just listen to these quotes, and then you'll basically have read the book. So
this is essentially just going to be commentary, right? We're just going to give some commentary throughout the quotes of this book, and we have quite a few.
There's probably at least like 40 quotes or something. Yeah. So I'll go first because I highlighted the first quote. This is about whenever. So at the beginning of the book, Tiernan's parents killed themselves. They killed themselves because they hate their daughter so much. I'm just kidding, but I wouldn't blame them if that was their reasoning. So apparently her dad like had some late stage cancer diagnosis and he wasn't gonna make it through the month or whatever, and her parents are so in love that they never had time for their child because they're rich celebrities and they can't be decent human beings and spend time with their children. And they love each other so much that they can't live a day without each other, so they kill themselves together. Very beautiful, if that's what you want to say. So Tiernan then has to move to within her uncle, and that's like the whole premise. But after she found out her parents died, she didn't cry, but this is what she said in her internal monologue. I'm not a sociopath. I mean, I cried during the Battle of Winterfell on Game of Thrones. If that's not the most millennial shit I've ever fucking heard in my entire life. I'm sorry? You're comparing your parents' death to a TV show?
And it's like lines like this throughout the entire book that completely remove readers like us out of the whole reading experience. Like, you can't even enjoy the monstrosity it is. You're just like, why would you say that? Why would you make that? Mine had to do with she got a splinter in her hand. I hated
this scene so much.
I don't really remember how she's like moving stuff or like working outside. So
he was
her Uncle Jake,
hammering something. Like they were like building something.
Oh yeah, she was like holding on. She gets this big old splinter. She can't get it out. So her Uncle Jake is like,
let's go into the shop.
So
you can't get it out with tweezers.
Gnaws at her hand.
He tried to get it out with tweezers, but
on
it
her
didn't.
hand.
Yeah,
I tried to get out with tweezers, so he's like sitting there like gnawing and licking and sucking on her hand. Who do you do that when you get a splinter?
I can't remember the last time I got it.
Would you do that to somebody else?
No, never. Not even Tyler. His hands would be so sweaty and gross. That's disgusting. But also, like, I remember I've had a splinter, and that shit hurts. Like, I had my grandpa had to get it out, but he used tweezers, obviously. He didn't suck my fucking hand, because he's not insane. But it's like, splinters are not that hard to get out. Like, you just scrape a little, like, that layer of the skin off if you really have to. You don't need to start sloppy-toppying that hand.
I'm not even gonna read it line for line because it's just foul. But
it's
yeah,
disgusting.
That was another instance. Gross. And then the next one is Kristen's.
Yeah, where the next two are mine actually. So first, their fridge is broken, and of course she lives in a house with 3 burly men, but they're not gonna fix their fucking fridge even though it's leaking all over their house. So she watches a YouTube video on how to fix the fridge, and she successfully fixes it. But while she's fixing it, she's worried that she might break the fridge, so she said, but that's a perk of being rich. I'll buy him a new one. Like, what?
Can't relate to that.
Yeah. No, literally. And then this is one of her first conversations with her cousins after she meets him for the first time, the younger one. He's still like 20-something, but not 18, so he goes, "So when do you turn 18? Noah asks. I don't stop as he just leans against the island watching me. November 1st. Like, why are you counting down the days to when your cousin turns 18? Please tell me.
And it was out, well, not like left field, just random.
It was
Like,
completely
so
random.
You're gonna be an adult.
Yeah. When can I
Good
start
chat,
sticking that P in that V? That's basically what he was asking. And don't worry, that birthday night.
Then the next quote, right, comes after she meets her other cousin who was out in the woods, which they call it being in. Caleb went in. And, like, you don't know what that means until he comes back and he's got, like, a deer slung over him. And he just, like, sees her and just, like, goes after her and tries to, like, go get
Rape her
and, like, fuck her. It's crazy.
And she's, like, saying no. She's actively saying no.
She's saying no the whole time. And then Noah's like, "What the hell's the matter with you, huh? Just cut him some slack. He's always starving when he comes back from being in the woods this long." That's what he was trying to do. Like,
it's so cringe. He's trying to eat your cooch, girl, not some dinner. Which, a minor. And then also a girl that is sitting here saying, "No, get off of me. Get off of me." But then she's like, "Oh, but I kind of liked it."
Baby, you're a victim.
And this is 20% into the book. 20%. So we're still in the 17. She's about to get raped by her cousin.
Oh, she says that. Okay, so they were in the car ride or something, or maybe they were at the dinner table, and she says some line to Jake because she's going after Jake. Like, she has a thing for her uncle.
They're beefing though. Like, it's like supposed to be like enemies to lovers, but they're not enemies because they're families, and he just hates her dad.
I can't remember what he says. He says something about her not being a man, so he has different rules, and she's like, "I may never be a man," I tell him, "but I won't always be a girl either." 21% in.
Like, that means soon we're gonna be fucking. That's what that means. And we're like, huh? Next up is I started saving these quotes because they were making me very irrationally angry, and they were very millennial. So there's not really any context you need for these, but one of them is that she got, like, candy from a store or something, but then she, like, has, like, an eating disorder or something, like, randomly. You know what I'm talking about? Like, it's, like, very, like, nonchalant. I don't eat dinner. I didn't eat breakfast. I don't eat blah, blah, blah. Because, like, her mom was, like, a movie star or something, so, like, her mom, like, ingrained in her to be skinny or something, so then she just casually has an eating disorder that never gets resolved or talked about or anything like that could actually be a productive commentary on, like, food disorders within Hollywood. But no, it's just like plot convenience. It's just to give this character some trauma. But she had a bag of candy that she threw away, and somebody put the bag of candy back on her dresser and was like, "Oh, eat me," or something like that. And she goes, "Someone is trolling me on a paper bag." Do you know what trolling is? And it's like, this was one of the first instances of a quote where I read this, and this is an AI bot writing this. No human being in their right mind would sit there and be like, "Oh, I got my paper bag of candy back. Someone's trolling me." That is, like, the most chronically online thing I've ever read in a book that was written in 2020. Or published in 2020. I guess I don't know when it was written, but it was just so cringe to me. And then another quote is that she talks about, I guess this is supposed to be her cousin. I can't remember who this is referring to. Do you know?
I think it's about Noah.
Maybe Noah, where she says, "But with a preppy hair and a baby face that makes him look like he should be the douchebag quarterback on a CW show." Again, millennial core. Millennials are obsessed with CW. They're obsessed with Riverdale. They're ruining society. No offense to millennials, but I think you're ruining society. The next, there's this really weird, like, classism and, like, I would say, like, borderline racist discussion about Jake, who is Tiernan's uncle. He, like, had a girlfriend. I guess they were only dating.
Girlfriend, previous lover from when they were, like, early 20s, maybe late teens, right?
Yes, and the way that, like, it's discussed about her is so, like, it's giving racist to me. I don't know if you got that too, but one of the quotes was, God, she was fucking beautiful. Her family worked on a vineyard. Immigrant. Poor. And then he, like, trails off. It's like, that's what you first... He talks about... The way that this woman is described, this is the love of his life. This woman means anything and everything to him. He's got a tattoo for her. And this is the first words that come to his mind are immigrant and poor. And that's what he has to say. And then, he has, like, a tattoo on him that says, My Mexico, and it's, like, the Mexican flag. Because, like, you find out later that, like, this woman ended up killing herself because she cheated on him or something. I don't even understand the whole plot with that. So it's just...
yeah. This is another one of those instances where the story gets really convoluted and you don't really know if it's going to play into anything later, and it doesn't. It really doesn't.
Penelope Douglass is obsessed with suicide. Like, obsessed. It's actually insane. Like, at least in this book. I guess I don't know about it in general. But, like, I don't think someone wanting to commit suicide makes it a dark romance. Like, that is the very much reality for multiple people. And especially, like, even me and Mariah can relate to that. And then just seeing it, like, written like it's just, like, oh, just, like, casual trauma for these people that they don't actually even try to work through or anything like that. That they're just like, oh, it's just something that happens. There's... All of the men in this book are extremely misogynistic. Extremely. Even the ones that you think are gonna be, like, not related to her. And, they seem kind of decent. Turns out they're misogynist, and they have lists in their house to, like, keep track of how many chicks they banged.
They're all motocross. That's, like, their thing, because they're in the country, so they do motocross. And
they have sex with
outdoorsy.
women. Those are the two hobbies in this town. Riding a dirt bike and having sex with women. Can or cannot be your cousin. Up to you.
That's gonna be the intro clip, isn't it?
I don't know. I feel like I got some zingers. Another millennial quote. This is while Noah is having sex with some random bitch. I mean chick. I mean girl. I mean... Anyways, not his cousin. Because God forbid he can't have sex with someone that's not his cousin. Her arm whips out, knocking off pieces of my Harry Potter wizard chess board, some tumbling to the floor. This is an actual mythical quote in this book.
I did a lot of investigating of Penelope Douglass's Instagram. I scrolled all the way back to 2014, and they were very, very into Harry Potter. Like, you can see it in the post. There's all the little figures in the books. Like, it's... I mean, like the Tumblr post
I was like, a Harry Potter girly. I bet during 2013 I would have related to that, but I've also grown up. I am an adult now. And by the time this book was published, it was very widely known that the author of Harry Potter is incredibly transphobic. Like, this is not a new revelation. This happened while I was in, like, late high school, and I was like, I can't support this series anymore after loving it throughout middle school and early high school. So, at the point that this was published, like, the Harry Potter train is over. You know, like, this came out in 2020. Like, the new movies were coming out, but nobody was watching them because they sucked, you know? So it's just crazy to me that, like, of the, I don't know, like, trademarked items to be referencing within your millennial core book, of course it has to be my Harry Potter wizarding chessboard. And then, not even, like, a page later, this dude is talking about how he's having sex with his ex's 18-year-old sister. Very much giving, I waited till she was an adult, so I'm a good person.
Because you likely know that they dated, and she was not probably 18.
Yes, whenever he was with his ex.
This is all speculation, but it's very sus.
It's very much implied there, where it's also like, oh, well, I waited till she was a legal adult, and so I'm not a pedophile.
Mind you, this is all 29% in. Like, this is where Chris and I really were on the same page, like, highlighting the same chapter.
Yeah. 29% was rough. That like, I swear that, like, 29%, 30% was the worst fucking pieces of literature I've ever read in my entire life.
This is, like, where they get into the whole tickling thing. Like, Noah and
tickling thing is ugly.
Tiernan, he's, like, tickling her on the reg.
Constantly.
Like, oh my gosh, it's so nice to have, like, a woman I'm not screwing in this house, and she's almost like a little sister to me.
He says that.
And I'm trying to fuck her. Yes.
He says it's that, like having a little sister.
Imagine, like, not even, like, a page later.
Not even. The tickling thing was uncomfortable, but then he starts dissing on his family members, which is honestly kind of funny to me, but it's like, look in the mirror as well. Like, you can diss on these people, but then, I don't remember what he says about his dad, but it wasn't funny. But then he said, Skid Row upstairs in Caleb's room where women are lucky to leave alive. Like, how are you gonna say that about your brother, but then sit here and defend him whenever he was sexually assaulting your cousin? But then talk about how fucked up he is and how insane he is to women in general. And
It's so icky.
it's literally the entire...
Like, relive my trauma.
This is reliving trauma. The next section I highlighted, it was because Noah was having experiences and feelings, as a normal human being does, because turns out he's actually interested in Tiernan for more than just her boobs and ass. She also has a personality, and so, he talks about how his stomach is in knots because he's obviously a fucking girl. Like, women are only allowed to have emotions and feelings and other things like that. Men don't do that, and the toxic masculinity in this is disgusting.
I thought it was super interesting for an author who, we don't want to make assumptions about their gender identity, but they're definitely somewhere
At least on the non-binary spectrum.
Because they use they, them pronouns. I mean, I suppose they could be a cis woman, but that hasn't come out. But to write in your books and maintain these strict binaries and like the social dynamics of your characters is very odd to me.
It's uncomfortable because, like, I read that and I was like, and mind you, in these scenes that we're talking about, Tiernan is coming out to Noah, telling him that one time she tried to kill herself. Yeah, like one day she went to the beach with a backpack full of books and she was gonna sink herself in the ocean, which, like, I guess one way to kill yourself. I don't think that's what most people think about whenever they're... That's such a... I feel like, as someone who has had those types of thoughts before, I don't think I ever thought about taking a big-ass backpack and sinking to the bottom of the ocean. But I guess I don't...
Seems like a lot of work.
That seems like an awful lot of work where you can easily just look at a bottle of pills or something. You know, like what I'm saying, where you're gonna sit here and you're like, oh, I'm so suicidal, but let me take this planned trip in my dad's car and drive to the beach and fill my backpack up with books, where I feel like a lot of the time suicide usually ends up being like an impulse decision in like ways where, like, obviously, like, you can plan it, but the actual act is impulsive. If that makes sense.
There's a lot of isolation and alienation, and Chris and I both have had our fair share of like family that have like committed suicide, and also our own like suicidal ideations. So it's, I don't know, I've never thought of driving to the beach, driving like an hour to the beach and then sitting on the beach and watching the not sunrise, but it is the sunrise, but you got to be poetic because you're Tiernan, and then you pack up your backpack full of like first edition books and you try to sink it, and then you don't, you just swim back. There's just too many steps in it for you to
have been
to back out of,
which is like, to me, it's written as if like Penelope Douglass has not actually like experienced suicidal tendencies or had suicidal thoughts in that way, which I don't think just because you haven't felt that way doesn't mean you shouldn't write like characters like that. But to me, the way that this happens to this character, it just felt like it's supposed to be like character lore instead of being like an actual meaningful.
It's like character lore, and also like romanticizing it because it's like a poetic, like her parents, they loved each other so much that they
killed themselves.
They died via overdose in bed or whatever.
Very Romeo and Juliet-esque, where it's like...
Yeah.
But I think that the reason why it works within Romeo and Juliet is because you understand that they're children and that it wasn't actually love, that it's impulsive children that don't know anything about anything, versus these two being grown adults having a grown child, and it's just like, oh, they're incredibly selfish, that's why they did it, sort of thing. But it's like, not everybody that kills themselves is selfish in that way. And I know a lot of things too where, like, at least like from what I've read, where like, so men do commit suicide more than women, like statistically they're more successful and things like that. But I saw before that there was like a study about why women usually don't end up, they do like the less violent ways because they end up thinking about who's gonna find them and how they're gonna have to clean it up, versus men going in the more violent directions where they don't have that forethought about like, oh, like, if I shoot my brains out, then there's blood everywhere. No, like, they don't think about like the cleanup process or like being found or anything like that, versus women do think about that stuff, which is typically why they go for like pills and stuff like that, which is easier to
Yeah, so
prevent.
that makes sense. The statistic would be around like the completion rate rather than the attempt rate.
Yes. And so I just think that's why, to me at least, because you look at like how typical people that have suicidal thoughts and intentions and things like that, how they attempt suicide is usually like some people will get into a car and drive their car off a bridge or something like that, or drive their car into a wall or something like that. Like, she could have done that while she was driving to the beach if she was truly interested in doing something like that, you know? Like, you don't plan this beautiful moment at the beach to go drown. Also, who picks drowning? That's like the worst way to die. The reason why you choose to kill yourself is to stop the suffering, when drowning is literally like the worst ways, like one of the most suffering ways to die. So I don't even understand.
It's very odd.
Like, that's the whole reason why people choose like a gun is instant like relief, you're done, you know, or even like pills, it puts you to sleep, you know. Not that I'm endorsing suicide, by the way, but I'm just saying, as someone who has thought about this more than probably the typical human being, I don't think what Tiernan was doing was actually meant to do anything except for maybe garner sympathy for a shitty character. And I think that's
like, you can tell, like, I think she's supposed to be like attention seeking because her parents are so neglectful. Like, it was supposed to be like a grab at their attention, and that's like another thing.
But
is,
she
like,
didn't even tell them.
with suicide being, I know, he's like, well, maybe they'll notice if their car is gone.
It's like the scene in Coraline where it's like, I almost died today, Mom. I almost fell into the well. That's great, honey. Oh, I do want to talk about this quote. People love looking at the ocean at sunrise or sunset, but I love looking at it right before the sun is up or right after sundown. This is the most infuriating fucking quote I've ever read in my entire life, and I could write a 20-page video essay on why this fucking quote is the stupidest fucking thing I've ever fucking read in my entire life. What is a sunrise? What is a sunset? Mariah, whenever you see a sunrise or a sunset, what would you describe as happening?
Well, either the sun is rising or the sun is setting.
So what would you say is right before the sun is up? Whenever you can still see the pink and the orange in the sky, but it maybe hasn't fully passed the horizon. What do you think that's called? Because in my lexicon of English, in my entire life, I would have preferred that to as the sunset or the sunrise. Just because it's not, once it gets fully over the horizon, then it's done. But the action of it, whenever it's like going through the motion, that's like the whole phase of time. It's like an hour long, usually. Could be more, could be less, especially on the beach. It's beautiful. It's a great thing. But that moment, it's still the sunrise or the sunset. I'd say it's the sunrise or sunset until it's either completely dark outside or completely bright outside, you know?
I'm glad that other people are going to be able to hear this because I've heard this argument from Kristen several times.
It is, reading that quote is literal, in my mind, Penelope Douglass, like, I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. Actually, I have so much beef with you right now. Literally, you have no idea how much fucking beef I have with you. It's literally insane. But you did not write this fucking book. You fucking put these prompts into a fucking AI generator and fucking typed that shit out and then read it. I was like, oh, this sounds like so artsy and poetic. This sounds like fucking shit. It sounds like you don't know how to fucking write a fucking piece of sentence without fucking thinking about it. Read it. How about next time proofread what you fucking write? Your fucking stupid ass Wattpad shit. I've read better shit on Wattpad.
The entire, I think, premise of this book felt like Penelope Douglass had an idea. And it's surrounded around incest, right?
Great idea
and
already.
I feel like those lines, the concept was already written down, so they had to like find a way to connect all the components. Like, that's almost what it feels like, because there's no direction as to where this
That's
could
why
be
the pacing
going
in this is absolutely horrendous. Well, you'll spend 1 second reading about every second of this day, and then the next second, 5 months have passed, and she's 18, and then 5 months have passed. She's about to go to college. 5 months have passed. She's pregnant with Caleb's baby. Let's talk about that. Caleb, the person that whenever she first met tried to sexually assault her. Imagine being like on the wedding day, like do. The bridesmaid comes out and be like, I remember when Caleb and Tiernan met. He tried to rape her. What a beautiful love story. I'm sorry.
And it wasn't the only time. because he got jealous of his uncle who's screwing her, took her cherry that they were both upset about, and then
her cherry.
Caleb and Noah DP'd her.
Yeah, the brothers.
And then he got and was jealous and then wrote slut on her forehead and then got really mad while they were doing it. Mind you, Caleb does not speak. He is intentionally mute. So then
it's like implied that like he doesn't know how to talk.
Stop.
It's implied that he doesn't know how to talk, but it turns out he does know how to talk. He just had to relearn by reading the book they were reading together. This book makes me want to fucking blow my brains out. It's actually insane.
Now there's just lines where Tiernan is like analyzing what's happening with Caleb, and what did she say? She said something along the lines of like,
oh, and then we can't even talk about like how insane like the plot will be, where like randomly like the barn sets on fire. Like, so she lives on a farm, and like randomly the barn sets on fire, and so now there's like this whole like mystery of who set the barn on fire, whenever you know it's the misogynist that was hitting on her at the beginning of the book. And it's just like
there's
random
no real twist.
Action. Like,
it's not high stakes in any, it's just executed incredibly poorly. The line I was looking for was like his, because at some point Caleb does like sign language for his and like taps his chest.
He says mine.
And then Tiernan's like, oh my gosh, he acts wrong. He treated me wrong tonight. I'm confused too. I'm making mistakes too. I'm like, no, you're not though. You said no. You executed your autonomy over your body. Like, you're not
like,
in charge.
You don't
for,
have
like,
to have
his feelings.
You don't have to have sex with everyone in that house, believe it or not. I'd argue you shouldn't have sex with any of them in that house, to be honest. And there's always just like
you should have just stayed with her personal shopper.
It was just no. That's not. I don't remember her name.
Mariah, Mariah, Mirai,
Mariah.
It's me.
Well, that wasn't even her personal shopper. That was just like her mom's assistant or something. And that lady deserves so much fucking better. And then she ends up with Jake. That is the sickest thing I've ever read in my entire life. This whole book is literally. The one thing that irks me is that the language that she chooses to use throughout this is so, like, no human person, you know, like how they always talk about how, like, nobody ever has original thoughts. Everyone's thought has been thought before. After this fucking stuff, I'm telling you, nobody has fucking thought any of these. What is my thighs clench? I have to go to the bathroom. Tell me why this is whenever her cousins are about to start fingering her in the bathtub. You're thinking about having to pee right now? That is what you have to think about?
Like SJM, like my watery bowels.
Yeah, like this is what you think about. And then there's this one where it says, do you mind this, baby Vanderberg? The cousin's last name is Vanderberg, and she had a different last name, but now she's a Vanderberg. And whenever they're about to DP her, they're like calling her baby Vanderberg, like referencing that they're familial members directly. And this one also irks me, which is more millennial core. The scent of pine and snow smells like Narnia and Christmas. Narnia and Christmas. I was not recalling a smell associated with Narnia.
Or Christmas.
I mean, Christmas I can see, like, Christmas trees or, like, cinnamony.
So, why wouldn't they just say, like, pine?
She did. She said the scent of pine and snow smells like Narnia and Christmas. This is why it's written by, like, an AI chatbot. This is not a thought people have. And then she talks about snow falling onto her wrist. The crisp snow falls off a branch and lands on a sliver of my wrist. The sliver of your wrist? What does that mean? Who says the sliver of my wrist? It fell on my wrist. Like, this is the thing where it's like Penelope Douglass was sitting here like, I know vocabulary words. I got an A+ in my vocab test in school. Like, you don't have to keep saying stupid shit. You can use normal words. You're not writing anything good. You're writing a porn about cousins having sex. This is not some literary analysis. And she tries to make it that way, and it just, like, makes it so cringeworthy.
It's not. That's what it means. Like, it's not executed right. Like, if you want to talk about, like, cousin fucking, like, whatever, do that. But don't try to make it deeper than the surface level that we know it is. Because it doesn't have any deeper impact.
But it tries to, and that's
no social commentary to be had.
But it's just like, that's why it's gross to hear about, like, the suicide attempts or like the other things, so like the credence, because like she talks about like her credence within herself and stuff like that, and I don't even know what the fuck credence means, and I don't want to know what it means after this, because
it was something like the truth, like you're like, I don't,
like, why are you sitting here trying to make this deep message when all you care about is writing about a barely legal girl having sex with her 40-year-old uncle and her 20-year-old cousins. Don't act like you care.
Like, it's just fiction. It's just fiction. It's just a story. It's not for you. But it was advertised to us, and lots of people have read it and recommended it. So obviously there was something there that you guys are recommending that is enticing. So then we read it and we're like, wow, it's dog shit. Are we supposed to just keep our mouths shut, not say anything?
Like, it's dog shit, and like, yeah, I will argue it definitely wasn't written for me. No, because I would never, and I will never put myself through something like this again. And I do this to myself every fucking time I see a book recommended on TikTok, especially if
this is unless I can get Kristen to read some more. I have some more fucked up ones you can read.
It's just so frustrating because, like, specifically on Book Talk, you sit here. I don't want to take any just general fiction. Like, the only thing Book Talk is good about recommending to me personally, I guess, is fantasy. The fantasy usually hits. I will say that. The fantasy usually hits. But the fantasy, like, even, like, SJM, she's okay. Like, I was very mid throughout Throne of Glass, very mid throughout ACOTAR. Crescent City is what I liked the most, but it's still not anything groundbreaking. Babel is groundbreaking. Six of Crows, groundbreaking. The Grishaverse, groundbreaking, which would not have found through TikTok, but I also would not have found things like Haunting Adeline, Credence, any of these other dark romances I would not have found, and I think my life would be in so much of a better place if I've never found this book.
It definitely makes the books that we like stand out significantly more, because it was very difficult to try to bounce between Babel and Credence, because that's what I was doing. Kristen finished.
I finished Babel and then went straight into this. I went into Babel and I was like on the high of reading the best piece of literary fiction I've ever read in my entire life. That it was just a beautiful, well thought out, perfectly planned story to this piece of dog shit that is literally, I can't even compare it to anything. It's literally just quite literally the most horrific, fucked up thing that I have ever read. And I thought that the worst thing I would have read, Tender as the Flesh, was objectively bad, like overall, because I think it tried to do like a social commentary, and I think it could be criticized more in that way because it didn't do a good job of that. So it has a lot more substance to critique. While this tries to have substance to critique, and it's just shit. It's just literal dog shit. It's horrendous. And I think it's horrible that people are here on TikTok recommending for people to go out of their way to read this, when this should not even have been published. Some thoughts just need to stay in your head, and this entire book was one of them.
I feel like if you want to read this book,
don't want to.
It was just a bad experience overall, and this is just an episode of us talking shit, but there really isn't any substance. This is worse than any Colleen Hoover book.
No, I'm so sorry to Colleen Hoover. I'm sorry to Ugly Love. Whenever I said that book sucked, I would rather read all of Colleen Hoover's books than read this again, or read anything else by Penelope Douglass. And it's sad because I kind of liked Punk 57. I kind of liked it. I gave it 3 stars. I thought it was okay. But this has put such a horrendous taste in my mouth about anything, especially dark romance, where I don't even want to read anything within like the dark romance book talk tag within years. Even though I know Mariah is going to make me read another dark romance the next month.
There's just something about a lot of these dark romances seem predicated on the idea of a young woman who's in a precarious position, and her duty throughout the entire book is to fix these troubled men. That's what it comes, like, it all boils down to, in my opinion. I've read quite a few of these, like, to bring them empathy and to help them see that, oh my god, like, life is worth, you know, not being an asshole or something. Who fucking knows?
Like Beauty and the Beast.
There's so many different plots. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to read. It's exhausting to, like, try to see, like, the mental gymnastics that the author's going through to try to convince you, the reader, that this is, like, a good story.
This horrible character is a redeemable character.
I'm not sold.
It's just, like, crazy to me that, like, I don't know, especially as, like, being, like, feminine in many ways, where, like, having to read this and then, like, this being something to even be entertained by whenever I felt like I was suffering because of Tiernan being with these horrible men. Like, there's no, like, good way to spin these men in any way, shape, or form. They're possessive, they're rude, they're disgusting. They're, like, not, like, gross where, like, they don't clean up after themselves. They're just, like, disgusting human beings that objectify their family member and other women. They're constantly talking about how they're bringing different women home to their house and, like, fucking different women every night of the week. where they're just womanizers, and you're supposed to sit here and be like, oh, I wonder which one she'll end up with. Hee. And you're like, why would you want her to end up with any of these horrible men? Have some fucking standards. It's actually crazy.
I don't have any other thoughts. I pretty much
After that rant of this horrible book, and that I just want everyone to know, I definitely wanted to pull my teeth out, and I was trying to do so many other things rather than read this, but I had to keep reading it because Mariah kept making me, and I just want to say, I would say that I'm sorry to Penelope Douglass, but I cannot be sorry. You put this horrendous thing out into the world, you've made your bed, and now you must lie in it. This is not literature. This is the worst thing anybody as a feminine presenting person could ever put out onto media, especially for young women, where they're going to sit here and read this and they can idolize these horrible men and think about this as how they're supposed to be treated, these negatively, the way that these men treat your young female main character. It's sick. It's not even cute. It's not even funny. It's just gross, and I don't even, like, this is, to me, what, like, pedophilic men are into. They read something like this, they watch something like this, and they're like, that's hot, whenever it's, like, actually disgusting. And I don't think, like, making it, like, the barely legal and trying to make it a coming-of-age story, this is not a coming-of-age story. This is sexual assault on this poor, traumatic character's life, and then you're just using it to profit off of it. And I think that's sick. And that's why you're a liberal. I mean, that's not why you're a liberal, but I know you're a liberal. It makes me
God.
So
Papa.
This makes me so, like,
this is crazy that you feel so passionately about this because you weren't even this animated during Haunting Adeline.
I know, and I feel so bad for, like, how I talk, because, like, just because I talk shit about this doesn't mean I can't criticize Haunting Adeline and things like that. That's another thing with the whole, like, consent, non-consent, where it just, like, makes it, this is, like, a godsend that majority men are not in book talk spaces, because I swear to God that the men that are in book talk spaces that have talked about, like, you know, like, not to bring up your one dude that wrote that one book, that Manic Pixie E-Girl.
Oh my God, yeah.
I didn't read that book. I think you have it on Kindle, but I don't know if you actually read it. But there's no way that that book is worse than this at all. And this one is highly promoted on TikTok. This one is. And then the other book is just, like, constantly torn down and things like that. Which is, like, fine, you can criticize that thing, but it's just, like, these people have such a double standard in, like, a way, and I don't think it advocates for true equality if you're gonna sit here and tear one author down for what they write, but then sit here and enjoy the dark romances, the consent, non-consent, and then just because it was written by a feminine presenting person or a female or whatever it is.
I agree. It's very frustrating to see people who will talk shit about other books. And they're like, no, this person's evil and whatnot. And then they praise other characters who are not, like, morally gray, but they're, like, objectively bad people who aren't doing the work to, like, fix themselves. Like, I'm sorry, even, like, the end of the book, like, Caleb, 6 weeks is not that long to, like, fix yourself.
No, that's a years-long process. And he's like, oh, I can finally talk now, so I got out of that car. And we didn't even talk about, like, the way that, like, all of the female characters are written, like, an incel wrote them, where they're, like, all the women are horrible bitches, pretty much. Like, their mother is a horrible woman and things like that. And I don't think, like, their mother, like, did the right thing at all either, and, like, the way that she treated her children. But the way that it's written feels so misogynist and stuff like that, that, like, to me, it honestly feels like this was written by, like, a man. This entire book does.
I would have to agree.
Like, somebody that does not
like,
understand.
If I read this and somebody told me that, like, Bret Easton Ellis wrote it, I would believe them. Like, the one who wrote American Psycho.
Oh.
100%. I would be like, yeah, that would make sense. It's harsh, but that's just what it is.
It's just sad because, like, you see this, especially as somebody that's a part of, like, the LGBTQ plus community, where you're gonna sit here and, like, have these identities within yourself, and you're gonna sit here and then still spread this entirely, like, misogynistic book and then just put it under the guise of dark romance, where it's like, why are you writing these, like, you're writing these characters in a positive light and flipping them into a positive light. And that's where the problem lies, in that way. Where at least, like, in Haunting Adeline and stuff like that, where Zayd is like, oh, I'm a horrible person, I'm a bad person. But then you get Caleb's perspective, you get Noah's perspective, you get Jake's perspective. Like, yeah, we're fucked up, but it's okay, I guess. Like, it's no, like, actual, like, self-reflecting and understanding what they're doing is entirely wrong. And I think that's where my main criticism is for this book, where it feels like disingenuous in so many different ways, where you want to sit here and have like a deeper conversation or a deeper meaning, but then you're just gonna say stupid shit like, oh, I as the woman have to take like the responsibility. And like Jake is literally misogynistic to her, where she shows up and he's like, oh, you need to cook and clean in the house. Like that's what he actively tells her to do. And then
She's like, well, do you know how to do anything else?
Yeah.
She's like, well, she literally doesn't know how to do anything, though.
She can't even cook. She's got like a personal chef, you know? And so it's just like crazy to me that like she'll sit here and be like, well, just because I'm a woman doesn't mean that. Like this is her internal monologue. She said that like, well, not all women only know how to cook and things like that. Then you sit here and let her take this verbal bullying from her family, and you just let it be. Like it's never like, she never criticizes her uncle really for it. If she does, it's very minimal.
So she like does their laundry and she cooks and cleans, and then she's hopping from bed to bed. Like it's just a really fucked up dynamic.
It's like literally like a man's wet dream about like, I guess besides the bed hopping part, where it's just like, my bitch wife needs to cook, clean, and have sex with me. And that's it. And that's all she does. Like, I mean, she does a few things with taking care of the animals, but it's definitely nothing major. And it's very sad because I'm sure, I would say that if it was any other author, I would think that Penelope Douglass could write a better character or a better female main character. But I don't know if it's in their wheelhouse. This is what they thought was the best thing to publish, was this draft of this version of this book. If you sat here and read all of this and thought this was a good thing to publish, there's no way you could have like any morals or any good morals, honestly, about young women and how they're treated, especially in like this type of society, this misogynistic society that we're living in.
Especially as somebody who was posting on their Instagram how they were pro-Roe and supporting and championing like equal rights and fighting against like the border, like things that were happening in like 2018, 2016. On their Instagram, like, oh, yeah, I support all of this stuff, and then to write something like this just feels so out of pocket, because I think you could have executed it in a different way.
If you want to write cousins fucking, you do you. But why do the cousins have to be misogynistic and horrible people? They didn't have to be horrible people. You wanted that. It's like the liberal wife with her Republican husband, like, dynamic, and like obviously we know in real life that never works out, but then it also just shows that like liberals and Republicans, because like, I'm sorry, like Noah and Caleb, they live in the country, they're Republicans no matter which way you want to spin it, and then she's from Hollywood, she's a liberal. Like it's very much like giving that like whole dynamic, and that whole dynamic is so inherently problematic in so many ways.
Like, oh, we have different ideas, but, we can still be civil. We can still be friends.
If we just meet in the middle, we won't have any issues in society, actually. And I don't know. It's just a very frustrating book, and I don't think the fact that this could come out of somebody that identifies as being, like, non-binary with, like, the they-them pronouns in some way, that you're on that spectrum, and then you wrote this and you published this, and not even, like, have any, like, other takes where it's like, oh, yeah, that was, like, kind of fucked up that I did that. Or, like, no apology or nothing. But no. Instead, like, just the other day, or on their, Instagram, they're like, oh my god, you people love this book. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you all love this book. When it's like, you haven't had, like, any reflective thought about why this book is problematic, especially for young women to be reading.
It sells.
Because especially, you're gonna see young girls who are turning 17, turning 18, that are like, oh, well, it's gonna be okay if I'm with a 20-year-old because, like, it's only a 2 years difference, whatever. Those 2 years between being 18 and 20 are still such a big difference versus whenever you're 19. Like, especially if you're 18 and still in high school, which she is still in high school, she doesn't have those experiences, versus, like, an 18-year-old that's in college. Obviously, they're going to have different experiences whenever they're living on their own for their first time in that way. And so it just feels icky to me in so many ways.
It's a bad book. Don't read it.
I hope that by the time you got to this point that you haven't read it, and if you still decide that you want to read it, good luck, Charlie, because it's disgusting. I wish I could, like, I feel like I'm not even fully articulating how bad this book is, even though I am violently attacking it.
I think you did. I think you did a very good job at like getting your points in. I think when you listen back, you'll like see it and you'll be like, okay.
Like, this is just, I feel like this book is rage bait, you know, like where you see like the tweets and stuff like that, where like this book is that, where it's just like trolls on the internet. Because I cannot imagine that somebody would actually like genuinely think this up and think this is a good idea. But the fact that like people are enjoying it is where my problem lies with it.
I feel like if we can bully the author of that dark romance of the clans,
oh yeah,
the clan man or whatever, I think we should do the same thing.
I think
with this author.
wait, hold on. Let me check something.
That book should be gone. I think that's not being sold.
But do you know who wrote it?
Mm-mm.
It is okay. I think it was written by Tilly Cole. Don't read this book. I will literally, since this podcast episode is now recorded, I will be purging this entire book from my mind. And all I know is that I will hopefully never, ever, 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 ever think about this book again. And if I do, I will be putting a bullet in my head. Thank you, and good night. I hate it. Anyways.
Stand up. Well, that was something.
Yep, that was definitely something.